Number one tells us that the ages of 130 different people that purchased a new BMW are represented in the box plots below. So these two diagrams that we call box plots give us a summary, an overall picture of people that purchased two different kinds of cars. What we don't know is that we don't have a list of all 130 different people, but there's a lot of information that we can actually gain from taking a look at those two diagrams. Just to kind of set the context here, if you're not familiar with what we're referring to in the problem, the BMW 3 Series is BMW's kind of entry-level car. It starts about $32,000, or at least that's what I pulled off the website. So it's a little bit smaller. The BMW 5 Series, you'll notice, is a little bit more expensive, almost $50,000 to start off with. It's a bigger car. It's got more space. And then they have the 7 Series that's even bigger than that. But we're just looking at the 3 and the 5. So we would expect that a car that's maybe smaller, less expensive, we might think that that might be a car that a younger person would be interested in, because maybe they don't have kids yet, don't have as much money, right? 5 Series, someone that's got a little bit more money, maybe they got some kids, they got some stuff to throw in the back, they need a little bit bigger car. So these are the kinds of patterns that we want to look at. So I take this problem and I almost think as if we worked for a car dealership, or we worked for BMW and they asked us to analyze what do we know about the people that are buying our cars, this is what we would do. So when we analyze or compare any two distributions, there's really three things that we want to take a look at. We want to know, what is the shape of the distribution? Are there any outliers? So we'll do shape. Are there any outliers? What is the center? And then what is the spread? And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of, the left side over here, or at least I'm on my left side, I'm going to jot down some kind of scratch work, and then what you'll notice on the right side here is the question says write a few sentences comparing the distributions. So what we'll do is this will kind of be our rough draft over here, and then we'll actually write up our little write-up here in a second. Alright, so first of all, shape. What are we referring to when we talk about shape? Well, there's really three things when we look at a distribution in terms of shape, and I'll bring this picture up so we can look at it while we're talking about it. So you might have something that's symmetric, right? Now this is a dot plot, a different type of representation, but the idea is the same. Is that with something symmetric, we're talking about that it's balanced. So you notice on this, for instance, that the left side pretty much looks like the same thing as the right side. Now what happens is that if something is not balanced, it's maybe leaning one way or the other. So if all of the data points are kind of clustered or grouped together on the left side, and then it begins to then kind of stretch out toward the right, then we say that that's skewed right. If the data points are kind of clustered over to the right side, and then it thins out as you go to the left, then we say that that's skewed left. And throughout this review, we have a couple other problems where we'll talk about shape, symmetry, skewed left, skewed right. But so this gives us a little bit of a starter. Now these were dot plots. I take a look at this. This is a box plot, so it's a different type of representation, but the idea is going to be the same. Just to identify the different parts of the box plot, there's a little diagram that I've put up here on the right-hand corner. So the middle line that's in the middle, or may not be in the middle of the box, is what we refer to as the median. So for instance, the median we know is the middle. So if I look for the 3 Series, and I'm just going to estimate, I might be off here a little bit, but let's say that that's maybe, I don't know, let's say that's 33 years old. So we're saying that the BMW 3 Series buyer has a median age of 33, right? What else? What do these other points tell us on here? Well, so we then identify the oldest person that's buying a 3 Series. So maybe we could say that's, I don't know, let's say 67, right? So this would be our maximum. The oldest person buying a 3 Series, 67. Youngest person buying a 3 Series, right? The furthest on the left. Again, we're kind of estimating. Let's call that 23. Right? And then you'll see two other parts, right? So there's this box. We said the median is the middle, right? So median is the middle. which is not necessarily the same thing as the average, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. So what these edges of these boxes represent is that these represent our first and our third quartiles. So that word quartile, right, and we see that written up here, quartile. So the lower quartile and then the upper quartile. That prefix core, Q-U-A, cuatro, right, almost kind of think of in Spanish, means 4. So you'll notice that what this has done is the box plot splits this up into 4 different sections. So here's one section, and I'll just do different colors so we can see. Here's another section. Here's the third section, and then let's go orange. And then here's a fourth section, right? So a box plot splits up the distribution or the numbers into 4 different sections. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's why we refer to this as the first quartile. So we'll label this. In our first quartile here, so let's maybe call that, I don't know, let's call that 27. And then maybe here, maybe we can call that 41. And again, these are ages of people that are buying the car here. And by the way, once we get all this kind of mapped out, then the work's going to be easy. There's not a whole lot of math here. It's more just interpreting and reading what this diagram looks like. So for the 3 series, so we'll say, I'll kind of split this up. We'll say 3 series, and then we'll say 5 series. Just kind of make a little bit of a table here. So if I look at the median age for a 3 series buyer, it's someone who's 33 years of age, right? In each section, by the way, we should point something out here, is that the reason why we call this a quartile, right? Again, 4, because it's split up into 1, 2, 3, 4. This line represents 100%, right? Represents everyone that we surveyed. So each section here, so for instance this one is a longer section. That doesn't mean that there's more people between the ages of 41 and 67 that bought a 3 series. All that it means that it's more spread out. So each section contains 25% of the group. So 25% of the group is in that section, 25% is in that section, 25% is in that section, and then 25% is in that section. So again, if a section is bigger, it doesn't mean that there's more people in that group. It just means that group is more spread out. So we have a lot of people. We might have 10 people here in between 27 and 33. We might also have 10 people from 41 to 67. It's just these people are grouped closer together in age. These people are grouped further apart in age. So when I look at the shape, so I'm looking here's my middle. Well, what it looks like is that it's more spread out as I go to the right. So as I go to the right here, think of this thing as almost kind of being stretched out to the right. So if something's being stretched out to the right, then we would say that that is skewed right. And you'll see here this definition, mean equal median, mean greater than median. We'll kind of, as we go through this again, we'll kind of get into more detail there. So I would say that this is going to be skewed right. So we'll say skewed right. Okay. The next thing I want to take a look at, and again I'm just talking about the 3 series, we'll talk about the 5 series in a second. Outliers, right? So an outlier is a data point that lies outside of where most of the data points are located. So an outlier in this case, for instance, how you'll see it on a box plot is you'll actually see a dot like we see for the 5 series. So because there is no outlier, or because there's no dot up here for the 3 series, there is none. And we'll talk about that dot here in a second. So what's the center, right? So the center, the median, is going to be 33. And then the spread, right? So what the spread refers to is the spread refers to the largest number minus the smallest number, right? So for instance, if we said spread, and we'll kind of just write this down here. So high minus low, right? So the highest number here is 67. The lowest number is 23. And so then if I find the difference between those things, we get 44. So there's a 44-year gap from the oldest person that bought the 3 Series to the youngest person that bought the 3 Series. All right, so let's look at the 5 Series, and once we got the information for both of them, then we'll be able to compare, and then we'll be able to do our little write-up here. So let's talk about the 5 Series. So the 5 Series, I'm just going to erase some of this here. So I always kind of start by looking at the median. So let's start by looking at the median. So the median for the 5 Series, let's say that that's maybe 41, right? Because that kind of matches up with what we said there for the 3 Series. What's the oldest person that bought a 5 Series? Looks like the oldest person, maybe 64. Who's the youngest person that bought a 5 Series? Let's maybe say 31. And then we want to know our quartiles, right? So our quartiles, and again, I erased the 25%, but I should say too that the box in the middle, that represents 50%, right? So we call that the middle 50. So let's say that this one is 39. And then let's say 50, I don't know, let's say 56. Right. And the numbers aren't, you know, because we don't actually have the list of numbers, that's not as important as the interpretation, which we're going to look at here in a second, right? So again, there's 4 different sections to this. So there's some chunk of people, there's 25% of people that were from 31 to 39. There's another chunk, pretty tightly grouped there between 39 and 41. Then there's another chunk from 41 to 56, and then the last piece from 56 to 64. So the shape, again, we're looking at the middle, and then we want to say on either side of the middle, is it balanced or is it leaning, stretched out in one direction or the other? So if I look at the distance, and what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the distance from the median and the end of the whisker. So from here to here, and then from here to here. Well, the distance from here to here is much more stretched out as I go to the right. So I would say that this is also skewed right. Are there any outliers? Yeah, it appears that there is actually one outlier, because it looks like, and we can even kind of sneak ahead here when we talk about the median. The median ends up being an older buyer, right? So it's a more expensive car. It's a bigger car, so it ends up being an older person that's buying this 5 Series. So the kind of the exception to that is that we do have one 25-year-old that's buying one, right? So the 25, so we can say one at 25 years of age. What's the spread? So again, we're saying high minus low. So we're going to say 64, and then minus 25, right? So we're saying that person's 25. So the difference between the two would be 39 years of age, right? So the 3 Series buyer, the oldest 3 Series buyer is older than the oldest 5 Series buyer, and then the youngest 3 Series buyer is younger than the youngest 5 Series buyer. So what we could see is that this whole thing is a little bit more stretched out for the 3 Series than it is the 5 Series. Alright, so let's make a comparison. So shape, so skewed right. We said that both distributions, so we could say both distributions are skewed right. And then what does that mean when we say that it's skewed right? What it means is that as the buyer of both cars, not just the 3 or the 5, but as the buyer of both cars gets older, their ages are more spread out, right? So what we can say there is that, we'll say this, both distributions are skewed right, indicating that the ages of buyers, or for buyers, becomes more spread out as age increases. And one thing we probably should sneak in there is that it becomes more spread out. So let's slide in a more there. Yeah, so that means it becomes more spread out as age increases. Outliers. We had one outlier for the 5 Series. So one outlier for the 5 Series. One outlier can be seen in the distribution can be seen in the distribution of the 5 Series comma with none for the 3 Series. And then we're just kind of going down our list here. Center. Okay, so it's not good enough for us just to say 3 Series had a median of 33, 5 Series had a median of 41. We have to compare these two, right? So the 5 Series, I'm kind of scroll up here a little bit. So the 5 Series had a higher median age as compared to the 3 Series. Right, and all we were saying there is that basically the 5 Series, it's a bigger car, it's a more expensive car, so it's an older person that's buying that vehicle, right? Even though we had an exception, right? We had our outlier of a 25-year-old, but for the most part, the 5 Series, it's going to be an older buyer. And the last thing we want to speak about is the spread. We want to speak about variability. If we're walking in, or if someone walks into a BMW dealership, and we want to randomly say, okay, what do we think that person's age is going to be? If they're here to buy a 3 Series, would you think they're younger or do you think they're older? Well, we're probably going to think that they're younger, right? 5 Series, we're probably going to think that they're going to be older. So, but the variability speaks to if we just, again, someone walks in and we have a blindfold on, am I going to get an old person or am I going to get a younger person? You notice with the 3 Series, right, the variability here is that the 23-year-old, that might be, someone's parents that might have some money, they buy their kid a BMW. A 67-year-old, right, so this might be grandma that's always wanted a BMW, but she didn't want to fork out all the money for a 5 Series or something more expensive. She just wants to say that she had a BMW. So that's where you see that older buyer, right? So there's much more variability in the 3 Series buyer. It's much more spread out because it's anywhere from a 23-year-old to a 67-year-old, whereas the 5 Series, again, anywhere from a 25-year-old to a 64-year-old. And that 25-year-old is really an outlier. So if we threw out the outlier, we're really saying from 31 to 64. So the higher range, or the greater range, so we'll say the greater range, so the greater range for the 3 Series suggests greater variability. And again, all we're saying there is that if somebody walked in and random person, who knows with the 3 Series? Could be a young person, could be an old person. So we're just saying there's more variability there, right? All right, so no, that was kind of a lot to go through in one problem. There's a lot of little pieces here to it, but hopefully as we kind of move forward, this will end up making a lot more sense. All right, so let's go ahead and stop now and try number 1 on the right side.